young funeral directors who are here locally. We have Bennett Forbes with Daniels, Amanda Trujillo Wallace with French, and Erin War, who is with Park Lawn, which is also Daniels. Yes. And my first question to you is, how'd you get into this business? And what's your career path been so far?
All right, so again, my name is Bennett Forbes, and I'm with Daniels, and I've been with Daniels just since June. So I kind of have a weird, windy road of a background, but I was born in Denver, and my dad worked at a funeral home, so all of my upbringing involved being at a funeral home, and so I was just destined to be a bit strange. And so, you know, in Colorado, it's kind of the Wild West. You don't have to be licensed for really anything. So I've kind of helped in every facet. You know, just the average 12-year-old helping cremate and cleaning the care center floors and mowing cemeteries. So doing a little bit of everything. Graduated high school, went and got my bachelor's in something completely different. Then moved back to Denver, and so from 2015 to 2017, I worked as an arranging director, so meeting with families, planning the services, and then wanted to see if I had other interests outside of that, and went for a few years and made the natural switch to irrigation manufacturing, and then tried my hand at some sales jobs in the tech world, and was just trying to figure out how to get back to the satisfaction that I felt in the funeral industry without being in the funeral industry. But everything just kept coming back on my checklist of what I wanted in a career path to led me back to seeking out, getting back to being a director, and so just through some connections, I had an opportunity to come to Daniels or to go out to Kansas City. And being from Colorado, I still wanted the mountains and the outdoors, and came down to New Mexico, and my wife and I and our little baby girl, we're loving it here so far. And so that's kind of my random path. I don't have the experience of the embalming. I've seen it, but I'm working on getting licensed to be all around kind of the funeral service general, I believe is what it is down here. So excited to be here.
Hello. Hi, I'm Amanda. My path is a little bit different. So I first became interested in the funeral industry because my dad passed away when I was 11. Just as a young kid, seeing that, I was like, wow, this is a job. This is something people actually do for a living. This seems interesting. So I kind of pursued it from that. My path was a little bit erratic at first as well. So I first, went to college, and without mortuary science, right in the forefront, I did some other things and worked other various jobs. But I eventually made my way toward mortuary science, went to school. I do have my FSP license. One of my areas where I have my most experience is in embalming in the prep room. Currently, I'm managing the university location of French funerals and cremations. So I don't expect or want to go any further than that. I really enjoy where I'm at right now. As far as managing a location, I don't want to own a funeral home. I think that would be too much liability for me, personally. But I really do enjoy growing a team. I have experience with running a crematory, transfers, as well as embalming, prep, directing, arranging, pretty much every aspect. I've been in the business about 11 years now. But yeah, I would say I chose this path because it is something that helps the community no matter what state the community is in. But we are frontline workers. We are forgotten about a lot of times, especially during a pandemic and during this type of situation. We are in the forefront. We are those forgotten middle child of the community work. But we are here, we are doing what we do, and I love it. Even during a zombie apocalypse, I mean, somebody's got to get rid of the bodies, so that's why I'm here.
I got this one. I got my own because I'm extra fancy. My name is Aaron War. I got into my career in kind of a roundabout way, as we all kind of do. I started off actually as a forensic photographer, working for the Office of the Medical Investigator, while pursuing my bachelor's degree, where I met my lovely lady, who's also a funeral director. So going to art school and working with OMI and teaching their investigators how to use digital cameras and kind of transitioning from the film slide days and all that stuff, and it was a blast. It was really nice to be a part of kind of the justice system, knowing that I could put my skills and talents to use in kind of a roundabout way in criminal cases, helping convict those that need to be convicted. But I kind of got bored after a while. Started working more with the doctors and assisting them with autopsies and helping more with examination photos, documenting heart conditions and a variety of other things that needed to be, and started actually assisting with the autopsies full time. Moved up to a supervisor position and got bored again. I think I tend to do that quite often. And I met somebody who's super influential. His name is Ed. He's an embalmer who's been around for years, and he taught me a few things that made a huge difference to a family that was not using a funeral home to take their loved one and proceed with burial. And that kind of changed a lot for me. It made me realize that there's a lot of help that was needed and satisfaction to be had by helping somebody doing something that I felt equipped to do. So I applied at French and got a job at the very, very bottom. Worked my way up, went to school, was directing there for a while, embalming there for a while, and left actually to go work for a casket company. I got offered a management position there. I figured I would maybe get away from some of the craziness that 2020 brought, and I got bored. So now I'm back in the funeral director's seat at Daniels, and very, very happy to be helping families and do what I think I do best.
And what are you drinking and what are you drinking?
I'm drinking, what are you drinking first?
I'm drinking the blood orange cider, which is delicious
Yay.
and sweet.
And I'm drinking, what is that? Honey wheat. Honey wheat.
Excellent.
Yes, from my honey.
And Bennett is not partaking.
I'm the designated driver tonight, I guess.
Okay.
Very important job, we all need one.
Yes. So what would you say is the biggest misconception you're seeing when people come in to make arrangements, either at need or pre-need?
My biggest misconception that I see a lot is that we are salespeople, that we're trying to make money, that we make commission. I have never heard of any funeral director making commission on any kind of merchandise or anything like that. Not to say that the funeral home is not a for-profit business. It is a for-profit business, but we don't get any commission from that. Funeral directors, for the most part, and every funeral director that I've been in contact with have had the privilege to work with or manage, has a passion for helping people. So definitely the casket sales and things like that is a huge misconception about that, especially about our business. We don't care what kind of casket you buy. We're going to direct you. We are directors. We are that stable person in your grief storm. You are in a storm of emotion. You're not thinking clearly. We're not here to take advantage of you. We're here to direct you and help you make a decision that's going to be great for your family, as well as the loved one you're trying to honor. So definitely biggest misconception on my part.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I agree with that. I just think they come in with this wall of, it's like when you go to buy a car or something, you expect you're gonna get taken advantage of, and so you go in kind of with your gloves up, fists up a bit. So just trying to disarm them, let them know, hey, well, I'll present you a lot of options today, but I'm gonna guide you through what I think would be best, but make sure we're on the same page. So no, I just second what Amanda said.
And just to add one more extra thing, because that is probably the best, and I think the best answer to that question. Funeral service is hard. It's very taxing. And I think to stay in funeral service, you have to be the type that really wants to care. If you're in it for the money, it's the wrong job. You know, we make livable wages, of course, but nothing astronomical, no commission. You know, if we were in it to take advantage of people, like, we should be in a different field for sure.
Well, and the hours are
Oh, yeah.
nonstop, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How does that work? I mean, is there scheduling for who gets to be called in the middle of the night?
Yeah, so I'll answer this if that's cool. So coming from French and going to Daniels has been very different. And when I was in the interim of working with the casket company and managing that company, I worked with a lot of funeral homes, and I am nosy. So I did my research and I asked questions, and I truly wanted to see where I would want to work next if I wanted to do that, which I did. But the big thing is every funeral home handles on-call differently. Oftentimes, a lot of the smaller ones, more localized or family operated, however you want to say it, a lot of their directors are working more complex schedules as far as like their on-call, when their days off are. For example, French, which is definitely still a family-owned company, they kind of have a rotation set up so that everybody occasionally has a weekend off, occasionally works weekdays, or has weekdays off so they could take care of business as they need to. At Daniels, I'm not sure about you guys out at Sarah, but my schedule is Monday through Friday, and then we rotate on call in the evening to answer any questions that are pressing that can't wait for business hours. So smaller funeral homes, I know some of the owners that are the sole director that are on 24/7. And when they get that call and they go out to the home, they're bringing the body back to start embalming immediately. So depending on where you're at, it can be 24/7.
Wow. Other thoughts?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the funeral home, but for the most part, we cannot determine when a death is going to happen. So we have to be available. We have to be available on the worst day of somebody's life, the worst night of somebody's life, whether that's 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it doesn't matter. We have to be there, and we have to be on it. We have to be the one to guide them through that storm. So being with French, I know the way we do our transfers and on-call type of situations, if you're an arranging director, you are on call a couple of nights a week or during the month. Everyone's on a rotation. Everybody takes a turn taking those calls as far as questions, pricing calls, things like that. And then of course we have our transfer staff that actually is that front line going out, picking up the loved one that happens to pass away in the middle of the night, bringing them into our care for the next step of the process. So definitely 24-hour, and if you do have that passion for the job, you're on all the time, regardless of what they say. Okay, I'm off at 5, but I have a family who I gave my cell phone number to. They're going to text me. They're going to text me, they're going to call, and of course, you know, if you have that passion for it, you're going to answer that call. And that's how you can differentiate, you know, a job versus a career and a calling. I knew it would happen.
So when we talk about removals, and I'm bringing this up because I just experienced one last week where a friend of mine who was on hospice died at home, and my husband and I were the ones to discover him in the bathroom on the floor. And how do you handle a family that's upset? Or, I mean, I'm the doyen of death. I can handle this. And I handled it very professionally, but then the emotions start creeping in later. And what do you see when you're doing removals? I'm sure it's all over the place.
Well, what I can say is that, first of all, my condolences. That's awful to go through. I'm so sorry. What you have to do is you kind of have to, as the director, you have to remove yourself from that situation emotionally. Because like I've said before, is you are the director. You have to direct that family through that storm. So you have to remove yourself emotionally from that situation, and so that you can see clearly, you can see the logic, you can see what's going to be best for that family. Not to say that it isn't hard. Like Erin said, it is a hard job. It's hard to be constantly putting yourself in that emotional situation, having that empathy for the family, as well as trying to do your job in the most efficient and professional way possible, while still being a human being and still, taking care of that family. So just in my experience, I really put myself in that situation, in their shoes, and what would I want somebody to tell me, or how would I want somebody to remove this person from my house if I was in their situation? And that's basically the first thing you want to do, is put yourself in that person's shoes. And empathy is a huge thing that you have to not only learn, but, be able to take yourself in and out of. And it's really hard at sometimes. But definitely, what do I want to see if I'm in that situation? How would I want this person to be treating like my loved one if they were getting removed from this house? If they were speaking to me, how would I want to feel? And I just try to make them feel that way, and make them feel like I'm in control. I'm going to guide you through this. You can trust me. I'm going to get you through it. And it's going to be hard, but we're going to get through it.
So do you actually go out for removals?
I have, yes. Not so much anymore in the position that I'm in right now, but it still is a thing that I've done in the most recent past. I actually do have our transfer supervisor who is here tonight as well, Angie. So she has a lot of experience with that, but yes, it's definitely any one of us could be called at any moment, especially with how the workforce is right now. We do have, we're short-staffed. Everywhere is short-staffed. So, we could be called and, after we get out of an arrangement, hey, we have a home death. We need you to come to this home death. So it is definitely a possibility that happens more often than not, and we're all required and willing to help when we need to.
Did you have something to add?
Not much.
Oh.
I mean, that was very thorough and exactly accurate. I would just say the only thing I would add is, and slow things down, especially when you're at home or at someone else's home. Their world's turned upside down, or maybe it isn't. Sometimes you have a situation where they're grieving by making jokes and it's seemingly inappropriate. Other times, it's a very delicate situation. You never really know what home you're walking into. But the one thing I found when I was doing transfers was slowing things down a lot and over-explaining everything. I mean, oftentimes there's tricky situations where somebody may not be positioned well the way that they passed away, and you have to move them before placing them on the gurney. And so really slowing down and explaining to the family what's going on and showing that care makes a big difference for sure.
I was impressed that the team that came and removed my friend they had brought a sheet and they wrapped him, well, we had put a blanket over him and then they wrapped him in the sheet and used the sheet to pick him up and wrapped him and put him on the body board, strapped him in, and then covered him with like a burgundy fuzzy cover, so it's like, you know, a comforter kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought that was very nice.
That is.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience that you'd like to pose at this point?
I have a
Yes.
question for Mr. Colorado there.
Yeah.
So you said that the licensing in Colorado is like non-existent.
To meet with families down here, even just not embalming, none of that side of things down here, I have to have what's a FSI, so a funeral service intern license. And so before I could even meet with families, I had to have that. And now I'm working on accumulating X amount of cases, families that I'm meeting with, funerals that I'm directing. And so in Colorado, just from day one, you know, there's training, but no official licensing required. And so different funeral homes, like the one I was at, they will have different requirements, but on a state level, it's pretty open-ended. Yeah.
Well, and how about home funerals up in Colorado versus here in New Mexico? Can you talk a bit? Home funerals. If somebody wanted to have their loved one at home and like wash them and dress them and casket them themselves and then either bury them or send them to the crematory, there must be a difference between Colorado and New Mexico.
So in Colorado, that wasn't a real common, you know, the 2 years I was there, not a lot of people requesting that, because there's still cemetery guidelines and requirements. But do you guys have any experience with that? Yeah.
Yeah, quite a bit. So I just did one pretty recently. Here in New Mexico, we have a lot of indigenous people. We have a lot of Native Americans that do a lot of home funerals. It's not completely uncommon. It's not as common as other areas, I would assume, but it is legal. What I recently did, just as an example, is I had a young person who was disabled. The family was from the Pueblo. They wanted to do a home visitation. So we, of course, took that person into our care. We did our preparation. We went through the arrangements like normal. And then instead of going to a church or anything like that, we just went to the house, the family home, dropped her off there, set her up there, made sure the family had everything that they needed, answered any questions that they may have that may arise as far as keeping a deceased person there overnight. And then we left them there. It's their person. They're, who are we to say what they're going to do with that person? We did everything that we can to help facilitate that. And then they were able to have what they needed to do there at the family home. We came back the next day and helped them with the burial, and went to the cemetery and helped with the burial as far as lowering the casket and things like that into the ground. So as far as any kind of home death, I am all for any kind of person who wants to be as involved with that process as possible. I mean, the whole reason why I became a funeral director and came into this business is because I wanted to help my own family. I wanted to do stuff for, my own community. I wanted to be the one to help my own family. So how am I going to deny that to somebody else? If anybody wants to do anything with their own loved one, I am all for it. I'm here to help you through that process. When you're grieving, you have cognitive impairment. So you're unable to understand a lot of things. You have a lot of emotions going around, and a funeral director is going to help you through that. Regardless of what it is, will help you through the legal aspect, death certificates, things like that. What can I do? What can I not do? What are the logistics with this? Like, we're here to help you with that part of it. Whatever you need to do to help your grieving process and to help, culturally, religiously, whatever you need, we're here to just help direct you through that. And that's what I got.
So I noticed, well, I guess it's kind of hard to say that I noticed an increase because I wasn't directing prior to COVID. I was embalming, but I wasn't in a director seat, so I can't really say that this didn't happen much before. But I noticed during COVID a lot of, I personally had a pretty high number of like family visitations, like home visitations and home funeral services as a solution to gathering size limitations, which I thought was actually kind of great because, you know, on one hand, I would love to enforce that people separate and be safe. Can't always control that. And I feel like that's better that at least they took it upon themselves to do it in a private space than in a public space. But I did see that quite often, which was kind of nice to be a part of because I think there was a different kind of healing that I felt like I could see. I mean, they were very tired the next day because they stayed up all night with their loved one, but there's just a different kind of healing that seemed to come from it.
It's definitely like, to that point too, I'd noticed the same thing. During COVID, a lot of people are like, well, what if I just have it at my house? With COVID, and this could bring up a whole other line of questioning, but with COVID, it is disrupting the grieving process. It's disrupting the way that people grieve and the way that people honor their dead. It is not normal. So not being able to gather, not being able to hug and kiss and cry, and you know, that takes away a lot. So we're going to get a lot of displaced grief. We're going to get a lot of people in different spaces in the future, especially if they've lost somebody, not only due to COVID, but just at all. There were times where we could only have 5 people at any kind of funeral service. So I know there's a lot of Hispanics in New Mexico, so imagine picking 5 people from your family that can come to the funeral. That's ridiculous. Like, there's like, you have 5 siblings. There's no way that you can pick 5 people from your family to come. Like, you're gonna have at least 35. And that's just immediate family. So that was an added stress onto that. But I did see that as a solution, is people saying like, why can't we have them at home? If we just have everyone at home, then you guys won't be liable, that kind of thing. So it definitely was a new territory. There's a question over here.
Oh, go ahead.
That's the second time you've used the term liability. And so I'm wondering, I mean, to the extent you feel comfortable discussing it, professional curiosity piqued, just wondering what kind of, obviously there's some state regulations that you're concerned with. What other kind of concerns do you have as far as liability?
Liability for me, personally, and as a manager, is anything that is going to cause any more emotional distress than what is already present. So our job is to not make things worse, is to make things smooth and to guide you through that process. And that's why it's a tricky situation for funeral directors, arrangers, embalmers, because we're in the middle of that. We're in the middle of that. We're performing a service and doing something for a family, but also like we have that emotional tie. We also have the family who is in a place where they can be taken advantage of very easily. So that puts us in a position where we can be taken advantage easily. It's a very tricky situation, especially right now with regards to liability. When people are upset, they lash out. And they want to blame everybody but themselves. If they're upset, they want to blame something. There needs to be something that's the cause of their pain. They can't blame the person who's deceased. They can't blame that person. They can't do anything about that. So what's the next best thing? The funeral director. They're the one that's there. They're the one that's controlling anything that has to do with that death. So yeah, there's a huge liability with that. And of course, we're always trying to make things as smooth and as possible for that family to get through this situation. And that's our job. And it gets really tricky sometimes. I hope that answered the question.
Other question?
Yeah, I have a question. So going back to like different cultures, how do you kind of practice like cultural competence with so many different cultures? You know, like we have Puebloan families here, we have Mexican families here, we got Vietnamese families here. So how do we bridge that? Like, how do we make sure that it's not just like a Western American like funeral, and that, you know, what they believe in and what they care about is incorporated into this funeral?
That's an awesome question.
Yeah, great question.
Maybe as the most recent newcomer to New Mexico, where there are so many different cultures than I've personally been able to have experience with. At least for the location that I'm at in Rio Rancho, they've placed me with his name's Ray Baldonado. He's a figurehead in the industry, and I think he embalmed when he was 14 years old. His dad, Norbert Baldonado. I mean, Daniels have put me in a position to be able to learn, and then on my end, I'm just trying to be as inquisitive as possible. I had the opportunity to go out to a pueblo at 2 a.m. A few weeks back, and it's such a neat place to be down here. But I want to make sure, and Daniels wants to make sure that we're honoring and being respectful. And so at least from where I'm at, as I don't have the experience yet, trying to seek after it and kind of be obnoxious with my questions to try to learn about it.
And I think that's the best point in regard to that, because there are so many different ways to help a family, and so many different ways that they need to be helped. Asking questions, there's never anything wrong with asking questions. And I've found that that's being interested is probably the fastest and easiest way to be able to honor somebody's wishes and honor their culture, is by caring and asking 3 more questions than you might originally want to. Even if you think you've asked everything, find more questions to ask. I think that some of my favorite funerals that I've ever helped with were situations where I was very, very unprepared and had no knowledge of the culture aside from what I learned in mortuary school, which is very streamlined. There's so many funeral practices and funeral rites out there. There's no way to know them all and remember them all just by reading it once. And so yeah, being open and accepting and just trying to honor their wishes however you can, and just kind of showing what available resources we have that are at the family's disposal, I think is the best way to do it. At least from what I've seen too, it seems to be the best way.
Yeah, for sure. Agreeance, totally. Mortuary school gives you a very topical and very huge outline of different cultures and different funeral practices. But like Aaron said, just being inquisitive, asking questions, and just always having that servant's mentality. Like, we are here to serve the family. Whatever we need to do, we can't get offended. We have our own biases, we have our own religions, we have our own cultures, our own practices. But there have been times, especially being a woman in the industry, that I can't be allowed to be a part of it, which I can't get offended about. The best way to serve this family is to not be a part of it. Fine, I'm gonna find another avenue to make sure that this family gets served. So, I've had a ton of experience where we can't even be at the gravesite. So we've had binoculars, looking and making sure that things are going right, but, we can't shake the hand of the man making the arrangements. And you can't take offense to that. This industry is not a time to get political. It's not a time to get like, okay, well, this is 2021, whatever. It doesn't matter. You have to respect those boundaries, and you have to respect those cultures and those religions, and that's just what you have to do. Having that servant's heart and that servant's mentality of, I'm serving this family, this is what's going to best serve them, and this is what they need at this time. That's what you do. And like Aaron said, just asking questions. We don't know everything. I still get, Native families that I've never even heard of, tribes, pueblos, things that I've never served before. And just asking that question, like, what's traditional? What do you need me to do? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to dress? Do you need me to do this? Like, just asking questions is going to help tremendously.
Other questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
On a person passes away at home, who's the first person to call? I mean, I think it makes a difference whether they're maybe in bed, laying there, or in your circumstances, not in the right position, say you put on a curve. Because I've been told, death is not an emergency. So possibly if they pass away, they're in bed, the family could wait till morning to call you. But who do they call? Who's going to do, if they're not in hospice? If they're in hospice, I think they call the nurse from there. Someone has to determine the time of death. I don't know if you can do that, or can you take them away before someone is
So who do you call and when?
So when an individual passes away unexpectedly, you're very much correct. Pronouncement has to occur. And so somebody in a position of authority would need to arrive to do that. And oftentimes, it's the police that are called if it's totally unexpected. And the police will come out. Sometimes a paramedic will come out, make pronouncement. And if it's unexpected, that's usually when the medical examiner gets involved, because they want to make sure that everything has been checked over, that there is no foul play, things like that. Just generally make sure that the scene is safe and everything's documented. And then from there, it kind of depends. Oftentimes, that person is taken to the medical examiner for further examination. And holding, of course, until the family chooses a funeral home. Typically, when things are unexpected, the family just hasn't thought about it, because why would you need to? And so that person will go into safekeeping with the medical examiner's office. And if it turns out that maybe an examination isn't necessary and there's sufficient medical history, maybe somebody had a heart condition or whatnot, the pathologist at OMI will then kind of refer to their primary care doctor, and medical records will be used for the death certificate.
That actually happened to the ex-husband of a friend of mine who was here in Albuquerque, and he had a heart condition and was taking a nap and never woke up. And then I think they took his body to OMI, but they quickly looked at his medical records and said, yeah, that's probably the cause.
Yeah, and one of the things that's important to know about them as well is, while I use the word examination, while they are responsible oftentimes for determining one jurisdiction, who is the person to determine cause of death, they're also oftentimes doing autopsies and external examinations. But one of the things that I think people should know is they genuinely try not to, if they can. They try to not cause additional trauma to the body if necessary, if they can help it. I mean, meaning they're kind of trying to transition to virtual autopsies using full body CT scans, and in combination with medical records and things, so that they don't have to go and cause so much trauma to the body. And usually it speeds up the process for the family receiving death certificates also. And it helps the funeral home.
Let me ask you a question about OMI, since you have the mic. What do you think about television programs that are like CSI kind of shows compared to the real life of the OMI?
It's interesting because the thing that I don't think, they have to sensationalize everything, for sure. That's what makes a good story. But I will say, the one thing that I definitely walked away from OMI remembering was that statistics are huge, and statistics are relied on by a lot of these pathologists to really help them to kind of narrow their field of vision, and it works. Whether it's if somebody passes away unexpectedly at home, things like the residence being locked, that matters. You check these boxes and you can rule out a lot of different things and really narrow your scope of vision. And maybe instead of thinking that somebody was murdered, you can realize that they were very clever at concealing a drug problem or something. Or maybe they had suicidal ideations, and there's ways to kind of use statistics to narrow that field of view. And I think it's brilliant that it's kind of mind-blowing that we've come so far that we could really think, well, secure residence, past ideations, let's see what kind of recent prescriptions were filled, even though we can't find anything here. And really kind of dig deep. So the investigation side is amazing.
Have either of you had any OMI interactions that you want to weigh in on?
We deal with OMI all the time, every day. All day, every day. OMI, as far as the state of New Mexico, there's only one OMI that deals with the entire state. They deal with all unattended deaths, all unexpected deaths, and all the deaths that occur at UNMH. So that's UNM Hospital. So that means any death that occurs where someone is not under hospice care, where someone is not in a hospital other than UNMH, they are involved in. So that means that they're the ones that pronounce. If it's at UNMH, usually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they either go out to the hospital and just verify that, or those people actually get sent to OMI as their morgue. Other than that, any unattended death, if they are not under a hospice care, you have to call 911, the police. They come in, they determine that, this has happened, and then they call OMI. OMI comes out and sends an investigator onto the scene, and they actually will pronounce the death and take it from there. So yeah, we deal with OMI quite a bit. Getting your loved ones released from the Office of the Medical Investigator requires next of kin. So you have to have a next of kin signature in order to get that person from the Office of the Medical Investigator into the funeral home's care. And then at that point is when we can take over as far as arrangements. But other than that, yeah, it's been up and down just with the different chiefs and different examiners and different things like that. But for the most part, they have been pretty good to work with. I am also familiar with Eddie and his embalming. We called him Fast Eddie. So he's definitely valuable. I know he worked at OMI and he's an embalmer currently, so yeah. Definitely not fast, that's why he's called Fast Eddie. But definitely somebody who has a lot of integrity, and definitely with OMI, and OMI has a lot of really good people working for them.
Excellent. Other questions from the audience? Oh, back there, yes sir.
I'm sorry, I'm just kind of popping in and out. I have quite a few questions.
Oh boy.
Forgive me, I'm catching up with old friends, but so if you've already answered them, let me know. These are pretty detailed questions. I hope I'm not being too forward. It's something I don't know much about. Also, I don't know if you guys know, but Devin and Aaron are both really great artists, and they produce great photography and a great photographic scene. I don't know if you guys know that or not. So if you don't know that, you should ask them about it.
Thank you.
Embalming waste, like what comes out to the body when you're preparing the body.
Answered.
Answer. Okay.
We answered. I'm just kidding.
No.
Damn it.
Good question.
Like what goes down the drain, what doesn't, like how does that...
That's a great question. Well, and it actually depends on the culture. There are some cultures that want us to retain the blood that is drained. So as we inject a formaldehyde solution through the body, one of the things we do is we make an incision on the jugular vein, or the next closest vein to the injection point, and we drain the blood. And so there are some cultures that want us to save it, and so it's rare, at least it's been rare for me, but in those circumstances we'll save it and then return it with the body, or include it with the body on burial or cremation or whatever they want. Otherwise it goes down the drain. And a lot of people, that freaks a lot of people out. But I understand, absolutely. But think of the other things that are going down the drain. Prescriptions, there's countless other things that are just as odd. But yeah, down the drain.
I have other questions. Is that okay?
Keep them coming.
Okay. Rigor mortis, worst moments, does that happen by the time the body gets to you guys? Have you ever had that experience? Bodies moving on the table?
So rigor mortis usually happens within 12 hours of death. By the time that we get the individual is, it depends on when we get them, and the time of embalming. You can break rigor. Now I use the term break loosely. We don't break any bones or anything like that. So basically what it is when you die, your muscles will tense up and they will contract. So that will keep your limbs and your extremities in a tightened state. Breaking rigor is just relaxing those muscles. So that's just flexing the arm, flexing the fingers, flexing the legs, and breaking that rigor, which means you're just relaxing those muscles. Once you undo like a hand that's clenched, you undo the fingers, they're loose again. So that's, it's not a permanent state. You can break that rigor, and before embalming, we definitely do that. We will make sure the muscles are relaxed and that the body is positioned in a natural, relaxed state, which means flexing those muscles and just gently, moving the joints and everything around so that they're more in a relaxed state.
And there's sometimes when we receive a body that's gone way past that point where everything relaxes on its own again. So it's kind of interesting that that timeline does kind of include a natural relaxation of it as well. But yeah, just can't emphasize enough that term just being stretching or relaxing the muscles.
We're not breaking bones.
Yeah, never, ever would there ever be a reason for that to be something anybody needs or wants to do.
Yep.
Another question?
I have a whole flashcard.
Oh my God.
Let's do
This
it.
guy's prepared.
I didn't want to be rude. Okay, I'm interested in like the variety or perhaps like, sort of bizarre requests in terms of like preparation, in terms of families, cultures, things like that, like maybe things that maybe seem bizarre to someone that's not familiar with, different preparations. Like, are there things that you guys have to do that are sort of unique and special or strange in terms of preparing bodies?
It's only strange or bizarre if it's not familiar to you.
Right.
So I've had a lot of different kinds of requests. Trying to think of something like weird or bizarre that's not normal. I can't really think of anything, put on the spot like that. But we've been requested to do some weird things, anything that you can think of that anybody would want to do in life. We have been asked to accommodate that for the deceased person in death. So, they want Lottaburger with them. We've buried somebody with Lottaburger. We've put bumper stickers on caskets. They do not want to be naked. Can you please embalm them with their clothes on? Like, I've done that. It's definitely harder, but it is possible. You can do pretty much anything if the accommodation is in your wheelhouse and you're able to figure out a way around that, you're able to do that. Nothing is really off the table. If it's important to a family, it's important to us.
And just to give you some extra thing on top of the Lottaburger as far as specific stories, because we're here to share. Sexuality is something that our society really hasn't gotten comfortable talking about in the way that we probably should, or I hope we get to one point.
Sex and death.
Yeah, sex and death. And so I think some of my favorite weird requests are simple things that I don't think are a big deal, but to other people are a very big deal of how they, it's important to how they express their sexuality. For example, simple things like painting toenails. You wouldn't think that painting a 65-year-old man's toenails is really that wild. But for him, you know, that was that one thing that allowed him to feel a little, I don't know, jazzier, for lack of better. Yeah, and that was himself. And so I think that that's the way that I know I personally feel more connected to the family and the person that we're taking care of. Because we've talked a lot about family, but we didn't really talk about the fact that we're really honoring that person. And so we have to remember their subjectivity through this whole thing. Otherwise, like, I know we say the body a lot, but I mean, Frank is Frank, or Susan is Susan, you know what I mean? So remembering their subjectivity helps us to avoid any kind of problem by treating them as a person throughout that entire process.
Yeah, just so you know, I'm kind of the newbie here. So in my experience, where I've seen some of the requests that have caught me off guard have been with what people like to do with cremated remains, be it what they want to use for an urn or where they want to scatter. One of my favorites, the person loved to go hunting, so they wanted to take some of the cremated remains and work it into the gunpowder for the shells of hunting. And so it's always neat to me to see, like, really whatever you can come up with. It's just been a neat opportunity to be, oh, that's a really cool way, and then better serves us to be able to share those experiences with families, to open their mind to really, back to the honoring that family, to be like, you know, that the honoring your family member doesn't have to end at the service. You can, we can divide up the cremated remains, and you can be doing things with them for the rest of life. You know, I mean, it's just a pretty neat aspect.
I have a real quick interject. Okay, so we can do whatever we want, but what can we actually not do with dead bodies?
What can you not
What
do
can we
with
not do?
dead bodies?
That's a good question.
There's a lot you cannot do. You have to report a death.
Okay.
So if somebody dies, you have to report that, for sure. Right. Technically, it is illegal to scatter cremated remains. Technically, I know that's a shock to a lot of people, but it is technically illegal to scatter cremated remains. You can do it discreetly.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Exactly. We're not going to tell you where or how or when, but it is technically illegal. There are areas where you can scatter cremated remains legally. You can have a place to visit, but as far as actually legally scattering cremated remains, it is illegal in this state. You cannot, there's not really a whole lot. I mean, you do have to report the death. You do have to have somebody file the death certificate. Other than that, a funeral director, the only reason you would need that is for direction. It's in the job title. Obviously, we work for funeral homes. The reason that funeral homes became a thing is because it was cumbersome for families to deal with that while they were in a huge state of stress and emotional anxiety and duress. So that's why funeral homes became a thing. Now it's turning more into, people saying, why do we need funeral homes? Why do we need funeral directors? We can do everything on our own. Yeah, you can, but who's gonna show you how to do that? Like, who's gonna be the sane one who's not under that stress, who can tell you what to do, when to do it, what's okay, what's not okay, validate your decisions. That's what we're here for. I'm all for home funerals. I'm all for everybody taking care of their own dead, 100%. But let me help you. Let me guide you through that process. It's a scary process. Not everybody knows anything about it. Not everybody wants to deal with it. Not everybody wants to talk about death. It's scary, it's unknown. Nobody knows what happens. We know a little bit. Let us help you. That's what we're here for. We want to help people. It's not that we don't want to help you. It's we want to help you. This is what we're doing. This is what we're here for. So as far as things that you cannot do, It really depends. There's a lot of specifics, but there's not a whole lot that you can't do.
Yeah, there's a way to do most things, I guess, to be vague. You can't embalm without a license. The one thing that I have to kind of add, I mean, embalming in our mortuary science book is defined as mutilation of the body, but it's done with good intention, and it's done with the guidance of the family with very specific direction and permission. So, you know, there are things like that that without the license you can't do, but with the license and with permission, there's a lot of amazing things that can be done with the body when it comes to invasive things like restorations after car accidents. There are times where intervention gets complicated and we have to seek additional permission from family to do a restoration. And so it's tricky, but I think generally with the right licensing and process, most things are possible.
I mean, basically, the main thing is when somebody does pass away, a deceased individual has to be either embalmed, refrigerated, or interned within 24 hours. So if there's no refrigeration, that person needs to be embalmed. If there's no embalming, there needs to be refrigeration. If there's neither of those two, they need to be buried or cremated. So that's basically the state law as far as New Mexico goes, what you can do with a body. So if you have somebody who passes away at home who's on hospice care and you have family that's, you know, in California that's going to take them 12 hours to get here, we can wait. It's fine. Death is not an emergency. We don't have to do everything right now. The emergency has passed. What's important is making sure that we are taking care of that person with the most dignity and respect within the parameters of the law as far as, you know, refrigeration and final disposition. But after that, like, we're here to serve the family. Whatever they need, whatever within those parameters that we can do, we're up for, and we're all for going around things when we need to.
Legally, of
Yeah,
course.
we're creative.
Yes.
Is it legal in New Mexico to carry a dead body in your car without a permit?
Can you carry a dead body in your car without a permit?
That's a super good question.
It's a really good question, yeah.
You wouldn't believe how common that actually does come up in this state. Go ahead.
Technically, it is legal. We have something called a burial transit permit. So if that's something that you're planning on doing, usually the conversation happens with that funeral director or OMI or whoever happens to pronounce the death. We can get you a burial transit permit, which is basically just a document saying I do have dead human remains with me, and I'm trying to get from A to B. And that's basically all that says. If you are taking that individual from the place of death to the funeral home, to the cemetery, you are able to do that as long as it's within that 24-hour period. But normally a burial transit permit would be what you would need. But if it's within those 24 hours, you're able to, I've had families bring in their loved ones to the funeral home in the car, transporting themselves. We've had several families who do Mexican ship outs where they are taking their family back to Mexico. So they are picking up, coming back in a vehicle, whether it be a U-Haul, a pickup truck, a Suburban, a van, anything. They will take their own loved one and take it back to Mexico for their final arrangements there. So it is legal. Most likely nobody's going to stop you if that happens. But if they do stop you, you do have that burial transit permit, which says that you are legally allowed to have this person with you. This is how they died, blah, blah, blah.
I like to point out the film Little Miss Sunshine,
Yes,
where they got Grandpa on the back of the VW bus, and they do not have a burial transit.
And that's perfectly legal. We've had families who are like, can we just bring them to you? Yes, bring them. Like, it's fine. Yeah, bring them.
Yes, sir.
Sort of going back to like what you are allowed to do with the deceased, what sort of progress that you all know of that has New Mexico made as far as like green burials or human composting?
Not enough.
Agreed, not enough. There is a green burial cemetery south of Belen called La Puerta, which basically it's still a cemetery that you do have to pay for a plot. There is still money involved, but basically they have the land and the area where you can bury a human body, you can bury cremated remains without any kind of vault, without any kind of metal casket or outer burial container. Everything has to be compostable. They have to be a shroud or a casket of some sort that is decomposable. They also have a pet area as well where you can take your pets for either cremated pets or burial pets, and you can bury them out there as well. They only use natural stone or indigenous plants to mark the graves of the people that are buried there. So it's definitely one place that I know of in New Mexico that is thinking that way towards that. You are still allowed to have a service there. You're still able to work with a funeral home, with that cemetery. If that is your final disposition, you can work with that cemetery and take your loved one out there by whatever means you have worked with the cemetery with, or if you decide to take your loved one on your own. So it is definitely the only place that I know of so far. If you are wanting to bury remains, whether it be cremated or a full casketed burial on land that you own, that is also possible. You do have to contact your county clerk and make sure that that's okay. But for the most part, that's legal as well.
Another question.
Have you guys ever run into this situation where you have to prepare bodies again for burial? I'm talking about like exhumations, in which a body needs to be pulled out of the ground for whatever reason, and they need to be put back in. Is that something that you guys deal with?
Exhumation.
Yes. It's interesting. So Amanda's probably still working on one.
That one actually finished.
Oh, it did finish.
It was his case that I disinterred.
So long story short, there's a lot of reasons why. Sometimes a family moves and they want their loved one with them, so they will disinter and take that, actually recasket the body. Most cemeteries need a new casket. They don't want to inter an old one that's been buried. And they will bury at their new location. Sometimes they will disinter and cremate so they can take their loved one with them wherever they go without having to do costly disinterments every time they move. Or sometimes their chosen place of disposition is Arlington National Cemetery, which has a very long wait list, especially over the last couple of years. And so some families will choose a national cemetery like Santa Fe, where they can get in within the month, and will disinter when their time at Arlington is available, and then they will recasket and send their loved one to Arlington, just for a specific example.
Wow.
When you recast it, what does that body look like?
What does the body look like when you recast it?
It depends on the circumstances of the original interment. So the one that we were recently, he did the initial arrangements, initial burial at Santa Fe National Cemetery. I did the disinterment and reinterment at Arlington National Cemetery. That one was only about 9 months old or so. There was some mold, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, there wasn't any significant decomposition. There was embalming performed at the first interment, so that embalming definitely preserved the body up until that point. There was no immediate crazy smells or anything. There was, like I said, just the mold factor was probably the most thing, but so I don't know if you guys have seen those face masks that like foam up. That's what it looked like. If I'm being completely honest, yeah.
If there's slushiness in the casket, at what point does that come?
So it depends, again, on the environment, the embalming procedure, what fluids were used, the condition of the body before embalming, after embalming, the weather conditions, cemetery conditions, all of those are all variables and factors. If there is anything like that happens, we do have a re-embalming process, which not necessarily would be arterial embalming, which we raise the vessels and re-inject that body, but more of a topical embalming, which we would use powders and preservative powders and crystals and things like that to preserve that body and soak up any moisture. We do definitely use a body bag or a pouch and then place that individual in the new casket for reinterment.
All right, bonus question. What was your question about Millennial Morticians?
I'm sorry, how are millennials shaping the funeral industry, and what is that talking about? Like, what is their reaction, I guess?
Well, that is a good question coming from a millennial funeral director. I don't know. What did you tell me what you think about that? This whole table here is full of millennial morticians, if I have to say. We have transfer staff, we have arranging staff, we have embalmers, we have arrangers, directors, we have donor services over here. So
I have to interject though, because I have to point out an obvious answer to that question too. Look how many of them are women. Traditionally,
here.
you know, the stuffy, suited, beer belly funeral director, guy is a guy. And now we have tons of women that are coming into the industry and making amazing changes.
Indeed, indeed. It's ever evolving for sure.
Sure.
Backtracking a little bit to physical appearance, are there any things that families should be aware of at the time of passing or early set for that?
Excellent question.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So his question is about physical appearance and anything that the family should be aware of before viewing that deceased individual for services. This question is from somebody who works for donor services, which is a good question. Donors not only donate organs, but also the biggest organ, which is your skin, bones. Are also a big thing. So yes, the body is completely and totally viewable if that's the only thing that they are donating, which is skin, organs, bones, anything like that. We are able to have a viewing. There are some things that are cumbersome, which relates to embalming. So it's hard to handle something without skin, logistically. So we do try and let those families know these are the things that have been donated, these are the things that we need from you in order to have this service the way that you want it, which would include long sleeve clothing. There's other preparation that goes along with that on our end, but as far as the viewing end goes, long sleeve clothing, high collared shirts and dresses, things like that. But for the most part, if there hasn't been a accident that's disfiguring, we can have a totally viewable body with total skin, bone, and organ donation.
Cool. Any other questions?
I have one last question.
One
And
last
I guess this could be for everybody here. I would love to get into the funeral industry. I'm currently a teacher, and I probably am not going to do this forever. And I've always, felt a duty to the dead. So how do I know if I'm really down?
Come see me afterwards. No, for real. The only way to know if it's for you is to try it out. We are completely open as far as French goes, we are open. If you are curious, if you are wanting to know what it's like, if you're interested in the industry, please come see us. We will be more than happy to give you a tour, give you some insight on what it is to work in the industry. We are always hiring, as everybody else is, for every kind of position that you can think of, and any kind of personality, any kind of skill set. We need them all. So definitely come see me. I'll give you a card.
So it's hard to believe, but we've been having this conversation for about an hour now, and I wonder if we could wrap this up with some of your thoughts about what you're seeing in new trends in death care or revival of older traditions.
I think the one that I was kind of in a weird timing because I wasn't involved in this in the thick of COVID. Like I said, I was at a sprinkler manufacturing company. So coming back to the tail end, well, it's still going, but the real regulations and I think streaming and broadcasting a service. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Prior to COVID, could happen, but it wasn't something that was sought for the majority of the time. From what I understand during COVID, with 5 people sometimes being allowed to be able to make that service available. Well, since coming on, families are still wanting that, and so I think making. I think that's just going to be the way it is moving forward, is being able to broadcast and being able to stream that, and just the accessibility. We live in in a time where there's so much accessibility to everything. Why not funerals? And so I think my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I don't think that I ever heard so many people pick up on just new terminology without understanding quite what it was, like I did when people started throwing around, let's just Zoom it. Like during 2020, everybody, we'll just Zoom it. That was their solution to everything, without quite understanding that Zoom was a specific platform. But it was awesome at the same time, because there are so many people eager to try something new and find a way to still be together and not give up, ceremony, which is important. I think we're going to start seeing probably a lot more ceremony in the future as we kind of get past this, hopefully. Oh, I love you.
You drink. Woo.
Yeah, I think we'd all love to see this COVID stuff be something that's of the past. But I think it's going to, the times that we're in now are really going to pull us together more, hopefully, and we'll really partake more in ceremony, not just traditional white American ceremony that most people think funeral service is, which drives me crazy, but the way that they can best honor their loved one the way they want to.
I agree with both of these gentlemen. COVID has really opened up the door to new possibilities as far as different ways of honoring and remembering your loved ones, especially for those people that can't be there currently present. I mean, embalming itself came into existence because they needed to preserve bodies long enough for people to have those services. In the Civil War, they needed to preserve those bodies to get them over there. Same thing in COVID. We're delaying services for 10 days, 15 days. That's where embalming is important. That's where it's valuable. We need to be able to preserve those bodies, to be able to have that closure for the family who can't immediately be there because of this disease, because of this pandemic, because of all these weird logistics that are so foreign to us are now the normal. So it's become more important. Do I believe in embalming a body and then having a viewing the next day? Not necessarily. I mean, the preservation isn't really needed, but is that body going to look 100% better? Of course it is. But as far as like COVID cases, things like that, where you have services that are delayed, where you have to have a body that's died in New Mexico, but their hometown is Virginia. Like, you need to be able to preserve that body and give that family in Virginia the same kind of service as they would get in New Mexico. So that's where that embalming and importance with that ceremony is important, and we're able to give that to people. And if we're able to explain that and give that to people without those walls being thrown up right away, it makes our job a lot easier. We're only here to help. We only got into this business to help. But along with the Zoom, along with all the other things, every person is individual and unique. Every family is unique, and whatever you want to do, we're open to it. We're not, you know, these stuffy people in suits who are closed off and only want to do church services and go to the cemetery and drive the hearse. Like, those things are really cool. But whatever you guys want to do, we're here for it, and that's what we're here for. And we're here to serve the community and serve you, and whatever you guys need to do to get that closure and get that on your way to your journey of grief, like, we're here to help you.
Great way to end. Let's have a big round of applause for our Millennial Morticians. Thank you to these companies and organizations that make the Before I Die New Mexico Festival possible. A good goodbye. Gail Rubin puts the fun in funeral planning. Compassion and choices, improving care, expanding options, and empowering everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. Daniel's Family Funerals and Cremations, Fairview Memorial Park, Gabaldon Mortuary, Sandia Memory Gardens, and Vista Verde Memorial Park, all in the Albuquerque area. Estate Pros, offering professional dispersal of personal possessions due to a move, illness, or death. The Final Exit Network, educating about and defending the right to choose at end of life. French Funerals and Cremations and Sunset Memorial Park in Albuquerque. Gathering Us, providing in-person and virtual memorial services and online memorial pages. Keeper, providing hybrid and virtual memorial services and keeping memories alive with online tributes to preserve, celebrate, and share life legacies. Morris Hall, estate planning attorneys in New Mexico and Arizona. Remembering a Life, your guide to honoring a life well lived, from planning a tribute to mourning a loved one. And Retirement Extender, investment management services with a personalized strategy recommendation based on your needs and objectives.